pleasure to welcome and introduce Andrew Taylor-Troutman, Reverend Andrew Taylor-Troutman. He is pastor at Chapel in the Pines in Chatham County. Seems to me, Jerry and Faye, didn't y'all play hooky one Sunday? Oh, twice. You were ducking Scout Sunday one time and all the pandemonium. Anyway, I didn't meet Andrew till tonight, but I've known him for about 3 years. Ben recommended that Discovery class possibly consider his book, Parables of Parenthood. We felt safety in numbers and decided that as a class, by golly, we could take on parables. And if you haven't read that book, it's an amazing book because it just does so many different things. Andrew decided to write this book. He wanted some authentic parables, so he went back to the original Greek texts and, unless I'm wrong, translated them himself so that they would be done right. And he did all the synoptic gospels so that if the parables that were in one or two or three gospels, he put them side by side where they could be compared. We read those parables, and I will never forget that book because after our class did that book, I felt empowered that I was scared of parables before that, but I felt like I could really sit down and read them and get something out of them. The other thing that book did was, after 10 years of trying, I finally got a handle on what exegesis, hermeneutics, and redaction mean. Redaction is not just something that goes on in a shadowy place in the basement of government buildings. That it has a theological context as well. Anyway, I asked Andrew how he wanted to be introduced tonight. He said, keep it short and sweet. I just want to get up there and get to talking. So Andrew went to Lenore Ryan as an undergraduate. He went to Union, and then after Union or before Union did you go to UVA? After, went to UVA, and I gather his Parables of Parenthood book resulted from his experience at UVA. He's going to talk to us about speaking God, learning to speak God from scratch. Andrew.
Thank you. Yeah, welcome. Oh my gosh, it's so great to be here. Thank you for having me. I do come from Chapel Hill, so it's important to say that I feel really healthy. I don't have a fever. I don't have a cough. Did roll down the asphalt river known as I-64, and it was so lovely then to see the tar river, the real thing, and come in here, the county seat, right? And tell me, I bet it's not Edgecombe. I bet it's, what is it? How do you pronounce it? Edgecombe? A historic community, and wonderful to see it. It's comforting to me. I'm a North Carolina boy, and come into a new town and you see a brick courthouse. It's just solid feeling. And then to see your beautiful church surrounded by all the saints, right? St. David, and St. Patrick, and St. James, and then you have the saints in your cemetery, historic cemetery, and then the saints in here. And I'm grateful to be a part of it, part of an exciting church. It's so great. I'm honored that Ben asked me to come, and here we are. So I'd like to start with reciting a poem for you, an excerpt from a poem. Have any of you heard of the Irish pilgrim and writer? His name is John O'Donohue. There's this book of blessings. But this is called The Eyes of Jesus. And if you will, I would invite you to get comfortable, maybe even close your eyes, and just let's let these words be our invocation. I imagine the eyes of Jesus were harvest brown, the light of their gazing suffused with the seasons, the shadow of winter, the mind of spring, the blues of summer and amber of harvest. A gaze that is perfect sister to the kindness that dwelt in his beautiful hands. A gaze full of all that is still future, plying the soul with light, laying down a luminous layer beneath our brief and brittle days, until that promised dawn comes assured and harvest deft to unravel every last knot. And we are found back in the house that we have never left. Amen. So I was tasked with this wonderful book, Learning to Speak God from Scratch, and in particular chapters 2 and 3. And I was pleased that Jonathan Merritt immediately started talking about language development in young children, because I have 3 of them. Sam, who is 7, Asa, who is 4, and our daughter Sadie, who is 2. And I agree with Mr. Merritt that you do not need words in order to communicate. A scream will do just fine. Thank you. Over the years, I've jotted down some of their malapropisms, those words that they mispronounce, and some of their cutest sayings. When Asa was a little shy of 2, he used to reach his arms up and he'd say, "Carry you me, carry you me." And until even more recently, our daughter Sadie got in the habit of calling applesauce hippo sauce. And we don't know where that came from. But I want to tell you a story about our oldest Sam, who is the hero, really, of that book, Parables of Parenthood. Shortly after that book was published, Sam fell and broke his leg. I don't think the two were related. But as a result, he was in a full-length cast. And so he and I spent hours reading books together. And he developed this particular phrase. He would point at a picture and he would say, "Seber, Seber." And as he grew up a little and came to put words into sentences, our suspicion was confirmed what he was saying, because he would point in the same way and he would say, "I don't know what that is." Seber, I don't know what that is. And the thought occurred to me that one of the most helpful things that Mr. Merritt points out for your church, my church, and the Christian community is that what makes a community is the vocabulary that we share. So he and I formed a relationship through this new word, seber, and instinctively we knew what it meant. In the church, the English-speaking church, we use the same similar phrases around communion, right? And you are connecting this study with the study of the Lord's table. And so a phrase like, "Do this in remembrance of me." Well, you can have lots of conversation around that. Seber. What does that mean? And that's a wonderful teaching opportunity to unpack words like that we use all the time, that we might find the nugget of meaning in it. So hold that thought, because I want to return to that. But now Sam is 7.5 years old, and he has graduated from picture books to chapter books. And we've recently started The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, just like my father read to me. And when we got to the part about how the white witch decreed that it must always be winter and never Christmas, my son gasped audibly. But one of my favorite parts of the book, I'd just like to read you this scene. So those of you that aren't familiar with it, you should go read it before you read the rest of this book. You should go read that book. The children have gone in search of their wayward brother, and in the white witch's enchanted evil kingdom, they are taken in by these kindly beavers who feed them supper and give them advice. And a particular character comes up. So here's the scene. Mr. Beaver explained, Aslan is a lion, the great lion. Ooh, said one of the children named Susan. I thought he was a man. Is he quite safe? I shall feel rather nervous about meeting a lion. Safe, said Mr. Beaver. Who said anything about safe? Of course he isn't safe, but he is good. That scene came to mind as I was reading this book and the power of language, of words. Words are not safe, are they? Mr. Merritt uses the example of two particular words that start with F. If you remember this book, one is a derogatory slur that he was called in high school. And that was he said that felt like a bomb to him. The other is the word friend. That was a healing balm. These two words that were anything but safe. But one was good. And so the question then is, what makes a good word? And I think Mr. Merritt would answer this way. This is from his book, The Conclusion to Chapter 2. Well-chosen words empower us to express compassion and extend kindness. They equip us to bring out the best in others and ourselves. They help us extend grace when we feel stingy and offer hope when all appears dim. They help us cross the threshold from how the world is to how it ought to be. How the world is to how it ought to be. That's a good word. How does one speak amidst the anxiety that characterizes our culture today? What are the good words in the face of this pandemic? There's a professor named Roger Owens, who has a really helpful piece in this week's Christian Century. He says that Christians, when we're talking about the pandemic, we need to avoid the two extremes. One he calls catastrophic, the other he calls magical thinking. So on the one hand, you have the sky is falling, we are all doomed, there is no hope. On the other hand, you say, la la la, I'm not going to pay attention to the news, everything will be fine. The church is called to speak into the middle of that with well-chosen words, as Mr. Merritt says, clear, concise language that is informative, that gives facts, but is also seasoned. Seasoned with something that your pastor modeled for me. So just yesterday, I emailed Ben, and I told him that I was hoping to get here about 5:30, but I had this meeting at church. A special task force has been formed to look at how we are going to respond to COVID-19. And Ben told me, quote, "When you arrive, you will promptly be doused with hand sanitizer and made to bathe in it." And I love that line. And there's something about humor that is holy, especially when we have serious topics. That's a good word. Anne Lamott called laughter carbonated holiness. It literally lifts us. And so we try and find good words like that. We try and find good words that communicate both the truth and hope. This leads me into chapter 3, which I think is really fundamental to this book, because it's really what I read as the theological foundation for what Mr. Merritt's trying to do. And it's this essence of what is speech. And he actually goes as far to say is that speech is what makes us human. Instead of Homo sapien, he says we are Homo verba, creatures of speech. And I want to nuance that a little bit for you, and then ask you to break in groups and talk about it a little bit too. Because I think we could dig into that a little deeper together tonight. So I want to begin with what I think Merritt is right on, and that is how he grounds the importance of speech in the role of the biblical narrative. So he says this: words usher in every transformative moment in biblical history. And he does a quick sweep of the Bible, but it's accurate. From God speaking the world into existence in Genesis, to the gift of tongues at Pentecost, to David singing the songs, to Jesus telling the parables. The importance of speech is throughout the Bible. It's when he starts talking about a specific passage in particular that I think he might need a little massaging. So Merritt claims that when God created man and woman in the divine image, the imago Dei, that what that is the ability to speak. That speech is what makes us divine. This is an interesting theory. What I worry about, however, is what does that say about our relationship to the rest of the created world? And I'll give you an example. The largest animal on our planet. Do any of you know who that is? The blue whale. Blue whales are born weighing 4 tons. And they gain 200 pounds a day, guzzling 100 gallons of milk a day from their mama. And then they must go through an unimaginable puberty. And at 7 years old, the largest creature on this planet utterly disappears from human kin. We have virtually no idea what they are doing, though they are found in every ocean on this planet. About all we know is that they travel in pairs, and they emit this moaning sound that can be heard for miles underwater. Now, Merritt has this passing reference to the fact that animals can't write poetry. And what I want to say to that, how do you know? Who am I to say that blue whales don't have love songs and sonnets and ballads and fables and myths, war stories, stories that they tell about their young. Who am I to say? In fact, it's the height of arrogance to claim that you speak for all the truth when actually you know so little. And what we are continuing to find, the more we learn about the created world, is actually how wrong we were about the things we thought we knew. So a great example was written by a German forest expert named Peter Wellhoben. He has this book called The Hidden Life of Trees. It was long accepted as fact that trees were solitary creatures, fighting for survival, tree against tree in the forest. Wellhoben says that is not true. There's actually a community of cooperation in a forest, and the trees actually communicate with one another through their root systems. There are fungi in the root systems that change, and the message passes from tree to tree to tree. Trees talk to one another through their root systems. They are aware of things like drought, and they are aware of things like infectious disease. Trees are aware of pandemics. And who's to say that they actually aren't better communicators than we are? Who's to say that they don't actually speak clearer and more precisely about what's going on, as opposed to this spin that we create? So my point in this is a word of caution. In elevating the human's ability to speak, we may make the potentially dangerous assumption of human superiority and to divinely sanction it, which can justify abuse and even destruction. So what I want to say is, rather than homo verba, literally creatures of words, let's talk about the divine gift as homo bonum verbum, a good word. What does a good word look like? I actually think it can be just one word, literally. So let me tell you this story to give some legs to this abstract idea that I'm talking about. My brother married a good Tar Heel. My sister-in-law, Kelly, is from Southern Pines, which you may know if you play golf. And her childhood dream was to be married in her backyard. And so we did that in the summer of 2008. But as you all know, North Carolina summers are famous for their sudden storms, which both appear out of nowhere and are incredibly ferocious. So this particular storm rolled in 10 minutes before they were to be married and dumped rain. Everyone rushed inside. Everyone, that is, except for her older brother, who needed to be helped. My sister-in-law's older brother was born with profound special needs. It was said that he would not even live 1 year. And he has actually lived to be 44. He needs constant 24/7 supervision and care. He's in his mid-40s. He possesses only a handful of words. So we rushed inside, got Jonathan is his name, and he was seated up front. My brother is before the fireplace with Kelly. I'm the best man, so I'm seated right here. So I have a perfect view of Jonathan. And during the whole ceremony, he is looking at his sister and slowly clapping. And he's saying, Kelly, Kelly. He's saying her name. To this day, I tease my brother about his vows because they were incredibly long. He wrote not a vow, but an essay to his wife. But I think that the good word was given by her brother. Her brother. The other thing that concerns me about these two chapters that I've read is Merritt's one-sentence dismissal of those who have been born deaf in his discussion of how we acquire language. I think we can do a lot better than that. Now, to be clear, I trust Merritt's voice. I think he's an excellent writer. I do not think he intended to be pejorative. But I would not want anyone to be led to the conclusion and the misunderstanding that Jonathan, with his one word, is any less created in the image of God than my brother or me, who talk in front of people for a living. So I think this concept of the divine image in us as speech needs to be nuanced. It needs to be massaged. And I'm just working on this. So, I really want your help. So, what I propose, and, I don't have much authority here, but Ben said you would be open to this, is that you break off in small groups, maybe 3 or 4 people behind you, so that you can talk in the pews, and talk about what it is that is the Imago Dei, what is the divine image in us. So first of all, name it. And if you think it is speech, what is a good word? How would you define that? And then we can come back and talk for a little while. So let's take a short pause and just kind of gather ourselves and think for a moment about these questions. And then turn. What is... I'd love to be in your group. Let me turn off my microphone. All right, so if you want to finish up the profound thought that you're having, that you're speaking into existence, would anyone like to share something that they spoke about? Yes, Kathy.
This group came up with a number of ideas. Someone said love. Someone said something about the children and all of us. I quoted the Quakers, there's that of God in all of us. And we talked a little bit about how words are powerful and the importance of that aspect.
Thank you.
And humor.
Who else like to share? Yes, ma'am.
We decided that this young lady said that it was God in us. And I said we were all children of God, so therefore the light of God is shining in all of us, and that gives us our sacredness, our divine.
Beautiful.
And love is another word that came up too, Kathy. I think we're thinking on similar lines.
Isn't that wonderful?
Which is a good thing.
Hear, hear. Thank you. Who else? I saw some other hands. William's got a good one.
I wanted love. We just going to do the word. And William wanted grace.
Grace.
So the grace is our good word. I will.
Love and grace. Hope. Did you want to say more about hope? You are hope. Hope and... That's an excellent one. Hey, welcome. Anyone else like to share something? Please. Yes, don't you think? So I guess what Merritt's trying to say is yes, we are created in God's image. What does that look like? So if it's not hands and feet, a beard, it's something intangible, right? And classically, scholars have talked about reason, the capacity to reason. Merritt's making the argument that it's our facility with speech. That is God's image. And, he's right to point to Genesis 1, right? How God speaks the world into existence.
I personally don't know if we can't do all that. I don't know that because we don't speak the same language.
That's right.
I can't tell you that I know that the trees don't do that.
That's right.
And they might carry and talk about their children, and they might have compassion and all that. So I do not know that for sure.
And so this ties it back to this opening point, right? What creates relationship and community? Do you remember? A shared vocabulary. A shared vocabulary is what creates community. And how important then to ask questions about the words that we use, to mean what we say and be intentional about what we say. I'm just suggesting that we could be that intentional with other parts of God's creation too. And that maybe part of being created in God's image is the responsibility to do that very thing for other creatures. Yes, ma'am.
I think we're being too specific.
I've been accused of that before.
You mentioned beard.
Uh-huh.
I don't think beard has anything to do with it. I think we all have a nose.
Uh-huh.
We all have eyes. We all have head and arms and,
Uh-huh.
and all that. But when you say, you can't say everybody has hair because they don't. You can't say beard because not everybody has a beard.
True.
So I think you're being too specific when you start doing that.
Well, when I said beard, I was being silly.
Well,
I'm sorry.
I
But,
I think we need to just,
uh-huh.
we hope we all have 10 fingers. We hope we all have 10 toes. But I don't
So that's kind of the story of my sister-in-law's brother, right? Someone who we might say was lacking certain things, but someone who is, I believe, has the image of God in him. What is that essence then? And that's what I'm saying. I think we need to go further than just the ability to speak. Empathy. Soul. What did you say? Empathy. Yes.
What you said about a shared vocabulary
Mm-hmm.
brings us together.
Mm-hmm.
But if you use words more as a metaphor for other things that we share,
Yes.
you know what I'm saying?
I do. I think so.
We share certain emotions, and that's why we connected. We're not speaking. There's no language whatsoever. But we do sense that, and it's something beyond our ears, nose, and
Yeah.
eyes.
Yeah.
Does that make any sense?
I think it does.
Music does the same thing. And
Music.
without words, you know, you get just instruments playing that can convey
Exactly.
meaning.
Absolutely.
Maybe it's hearing more than speaking.
Oh, that's a thought there. Yes. Thank you. Well, I hope this has kind of primed the pump for your studies so you can read more about words. I'll also invite you to think about what my friend just said about word as a metaphor, because that's very biblical, right? And the Word was in the beginning, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And that is the Word that we celebrate at the Word's table, right? So it's that community building, it's that relationship, it's that metaphor of God coming to us. And then what is our responsibility to do with that? These are good things to think about in Lent. Yes. Journeying to the foot of the cross. I did want to save a little bit of time just in case you had any other questions for me. Thoughts or hints or allegations. The ability to relate. Yeah. I think that says something about empathy, right? To imagine yourself in the shoes of others. Yeah. To see Jesus in the least of these. To love your neighbor as yourself. Well, to see Jesus. So that'll transition into how I'd like to close. So, how many of you are familiar with this particular way of reading Scripture called Lectio Divina, or just Lectio? So the idea is that as you listen to the words, you listen and pay holy, ferocious attention to the one word that shimmers for you. The one word that shimmers for you, that speaks out to you, that just jumps in your mind like a neon sign. So what I want to do is share that O'Donohue poem for you again. And then after I'm finished, if you would be willing, I would like for you to speak your one word that came to you. And it can be from the poem, it can be from our discussion, it could be from your lunch. Don't let it be directly from your lunch. Let any word that you have to share. And that will be the Spirit speaking to the church through us, okay? That will be our closing prayer. All right? At the end, I'll invite us to close with the Lord's Prayer. Okay? Let us pray. I imagine the eyes of Jesus were harvest brown. The light of their gazing suffused with the seasons. The shadow of winter, the mind of spring. the blues of summer and amber of harvest. A gaze that is perfect sister to the kindness that dwelt in his beautiful hands. A gaze full of all that is still future, plying the soul with light, laying down a luminous layer beneath our brief and brittle days, until the promised dawn comes assured and harvest deft to unravel every last knot. And we are found home again in the house that we have never left.
Communication. Peace. Perfection.
Paradise. Holiness. Decisions.
Sure.
Hope.
Office. Life.
O Lord, make your children who you have created in your image bold to pray the prayer that your Son taught. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven.